And welcome back to another Foto Fridays. So this week we're still local, we're still in Portrush, but we're switching things up a little bit, and we're going to be playing about with the iPhone, and not just normal iPhone photography, but actually some long exposure iPhone photography. Now, I absolutely love photographing with the iPhone. It's not only the camera that's generally always with you, although I do like to carry my little Fuji X100T around with me most places as well, but actually as the years have gone in, the power of the camera on the iPhone and also the applications that you can use really have made it a feature-rich camera. Now, as I say, I love shooting with the iPhone, sort of normal photography, and I'll throw some of those images up sort of now and in a bit, but actually a bit that I really like doing is long exposure photography with the iPhone. Now, as I said, it is a little bit windy. The wind's coming in from the northwest, so first thing I'm going to have to try to do is find myself a little bit of shelter, because there's the wind blowing, because I did try just as I come out of the flat earlier on, and with the iPhone I'm generally doing that long exposure photography without any means of a tripod, although I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, and so the wind will catch your hands. So let's go find somewhere a little bit sheltered, and then hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of long exposure photography with the iPhone. Windy! Right, so I think I found a little area just to my left here, your right, and it's in the harbour, and there's a jetty that kind of points along, and so kind of it's not as windy there, so I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do a little bit of photography there. Now, just a little bit of a word on how I'm choosing to do long exposure on the iPhone. So I know there's different apps that you can get to do long exposure in the application, and I might talk about some of those in a bit, but actually my preferred method of doing long exposure is actually using the live feature of the iPhone. So obviously, as you can see here, if you take an image with the live feature enabled and then swipe up on that image, you have a couple of options, one of them being long exposure. So that is by far my preferred method for doing said long exposure on the iPhone. Now, that method does have some disadvantages, not least you have no real control over the length of the exposure, and so you have to kind of take what's given to you. But generally, for kind of what I'm looking to do with that long exposure, I have to say it works 90% of the time. So let's head down to the little jetty, we'll get the iPhone out, and we'll have a bit of a play. Well, that was a wee bit windy round that side of Moorhead. As I thought, because of the direction of the wind, much more sheltered in here. So I'm actually back to the location where I shot a couple of videos ago, my shooting local, and this may be the only location in Portrush today that I can actually use the iPhone, because everywhere else I'm just getting blown about like nobody's business. So there's a little bit of waves action going on, so hopefully I'll be able to capture something here. So again, just using the iPhone. All other aspects of photography are exactly the same. You're still looking for shapes, you're still looking for sort of movement, the contrast of those rocks against the waves, and obviously what you're doing then is you're just using the iPhone in live mode and then choosing the long exposure option. and looking to see what that can actually give you. So as I said earlier, using the live mode for long exposure does come with a couple of caveats. As I said, you're not able to sort of choose the shutter speed, but also it will actually crop in on your photo as well, and there'll be times that you sort of set up a composition, and then when you actually choose the live option, it cuts off the sort of top of the frame. So you have to bear that in mind whenever you're composing the image, that you know you're going to be losing some of the frame. But I've kind of got used to that now, so generally it still works out okay. So let's have a little bit of a play down here with some of the wave action and see whether we can get something with the iPhone. One of the biggest challenges you have with long exposure on the iPhone is generally you're going to be hand holding, especially on days like today where it is quite windy. Now, even though I am sheltered around here, there is still a little bit of hand movement going on, so it's always good to just really, well, you can double click on the image and zoom in on some of the more static areas of the image to see whether they're sharp enough. One of the other options is you could put your iPhone on a little tripod, or maybe one of those clamps, and clamp it off, and then using the timer you can actually have it to shoot after 3 seconds. I'm not sure if you can get a remote release for an iPhone. You can use the iPhone as a remote release for another camera, but I'm not sure you can get a remote release for the iPhone. Maybe you can. Anyway, I have this piece of garbage, which is the DJI Osmo without the camera. This is where you could seemingly put your iPhone in and get wonderfully smooth footage, which, to be fair, you can, but it basically drains the iPhone battery in about 8 minutes, so it is a piece of garbage. But it does hold the camera slightly steadier, so if I was really super critical, I could potentially use the iPhone in here, and using the little thumb wheel you can actually take an image that way, so you're not actually touching the camera itself. So we'll see whether that works out. So my favorite option for doing long exposure on the iPhone is certainly using the live mode, but there is another app that I use from time to time, and that's called slow shutter. Now, within slow shutter you have a lot more control over what you want to do, so you can actually choose the shutter speed, so the quarter of a second, half second. You can choose the file format that it's exported in. You can choose a few other sort of bits and pieces as well, but certainly that choosing your shutter speed. There is also an option for self-timer mode, so if you had the camera set up in on a tripod, then hopefully you can get a much smoother option. Now, one of the benefits of shooting with the slow shutter is you will actually see the image as soon as it's been taken, whereas obviously with the live mode you've got to kind of go into live check and see what it's like. One of the downsides to it, there's a lot of kind of button pressing to sort of clear images, because what you can do, as well as doing long exposure on the with slow shutter, you can actually do multiple exposure as well, which I have actually played with, especially when I'm doing a little bit of what's called intentional camera movement. That is combining long exposure with also moving your camera around, shaking it like you just don't care. Let's have a little play with a slow shutter and see whether we can get something worthwhile. So I think actually slow shutter and the little gimbal work reasonably well. I do like the finer control that you get with using slow shutter. Just obviously with the gimbal, it just sucks the battery life. So actually getting the iPhone locked off somewhere with a clamp, I think would actually yield some pretty nice results. But I have to admit, I was reasonably happy with some of the results there. So it'd be interesting to get those back home and take a look at them. Now, of course, one of the other benefits of having your photography on your iPhone is some of the editing apps that you get with the iPhone now are absolutely fantastic. And one of my favorites would be Snapseed. Snapseed? Snapseed. Snapseed. Say that 3 times fast while drinking something. So yeah, I would do a lot of my photo editing on the iPhone using Snapseed. using snap speed, snap speed, snap speed. So I would do a lot of my editing on the iPhone using an application called Snapseed, which is really fantastic, and you get some fine control over it, and also you can apply some filters and then use that as the baseline and then edit your photos from there. So quite often that's what I'll do, though. Photos that have been taken on the iPhone very rarely will get edited anywhere else. I sometimes even use the Lightroom app on the iPhone as well, which can be quite useful. So I think I'm going to have a bit of a wander along somewhere else. Again, I'm not too sure once we get out of this sort of shelter whether I'm going to be able to use the iPhone in the wind, but we'll give it a go anyway. Let's go for a dander. Snap speed, snap. So I've actually come down to the shoreline, and the sun has kind of disappeared in behind some clouds, but earlier on it was really highlighting some of this yellow lichen on the rocks. And so again, I was kind of using the long exposure just as a very small element in the frame, but actually using most of those sort of lines in the rocks and the colours in the rocks, so there's 90% of the frame, with just a little nod to a little bit of long exposure as well. So and of course, one of the benefits again with shooting with the iPhone is this has given me some ideas of maybe coming down here with the main camera, because I really love just how that late evening light sort of illuminates those coloured lichen, coloured boulders, the lichen on the boulders. So, oh, still windy though. Just a long exposure, still on the iPhone, this time using the live mode. Here comes that light again. Let me just show you those lichen coloured boulders. Just all these here, they're just beautiful. Ooh, wind. Let's see whether we get some other bits and pieces. As I said, using the live mode now in the native Photos app rather than slow shutter. So we're getting some lovely stormlight now. Again, this is the Scaries, which is featured in a couple of my videos of late. But just beautiful. Gotta be cautious about the waves. I don't think they're coming up too far, but there's been a couple of rogue ones again that have been a bit nasty. So again, now one of the problems I'm having shooting with the iPhone is of course the damn battery life on the iPhone. I'm shooting on a 7 Plus, which is obviously a couple of years old. Now I do bring a little battery pack with me, but even it's starting to die to death a little bit, so battery may stop play. It's been good fun actually coming out and shooting with the iPhone. I purposely didn't bring my big old tripod with me because I wanted to just focus on shooting with the iPhone. But yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed this again, this little ramble out along the Causeway Coast, proving again that the iPhone, and I'm sure Android phones and things as well, but I only really have experience with the iPhone, you can actually get some rather nice images. And of course it's the whole workflow that you can do, sort of the composing, the shooting, the editing, and then of course the posting. And in fact, even if I wanted to connect the iPhone to the printer, print out from the iPhone as well. I've actually printed up to A3 on the iPhone, and you know what, as long as you're not completely pixel peeping, it's not too bad. I'm going to carry on shooting till the battery dies in the iPhone. We'll catch up again next week. See you later. Bye bye.